Good morning. We missed you guys last week as it was a holiday week, so we all spent time with our families. But we are back for another episode of the Discord discussions. And with this podcast YouTube channel, we put together the idea that this is how a conversation should go amongst people who disagree. Everyone on the panel has a different religion, a different belief system, a different upbringing from a different country. You have opposing, dissenting opinions. And when we take a topic, we're trying to unpack the topic not on the idea of influence, but on the idea of understanding. So today, we're going to have a bit of a controversial topic, and in as much as we've tried to stay away from a lot of clickbait topics. But the topic we're going to talk about is sacred. What exactly is sacred? And I'm going to start with the definition of sacred, which is an interesting thing. So I'm going to read it to you from Google. So, sacred, connected with God or dedicated to a religion, purpose, and so deserving of veneration. Similarly, regarded with great respect and reverence by a particular religion, group of individuals, the animal is sacred to the Mexican culture, or it's a profit-oriented public to whom nothing is sacred, right? So that's a really interesting open to this because I was on Twitter, and I don't recommend being on Twitter. I mean, it's interesting to watch, but like the the ability for people to exhibit their worst behavior in Twitter is absolutely multiplied by 1,000 because they can hide behind autonomy. So they can say what they may truly think, but it's a, a
Well,
troll.
they're not hiding. People know who they are, but it's that thing where when you're when you're not in person,
Yeah, there's no
you get a
consequence.
lot
Yep.
you get a lot braver about what you say. That's right. Yeah.
So I was on Twitter and I came across an image of a biological male that has been given enough estrogen to develop boobs with a hairy chest, hairy legs, big man arms, breastfeeding a baby. And it's like, this is burning my eyes. Like, I need some bleach Visine.
Thank goodness babies don't remember breastfeeding cuz
Right.
that kid.
But but I bring that up because breastfeeding was one of the most sacred rights in our society. Women were always, and they're because that's the literal, you through breastfeeding, you give that child your immune system. You give them all the nutrients that they actually need, none of the crap they don't need, right? And it creates a bond to the child and mother that usually has, I don't know if there's scientific evidence, and somebody could probably do some research and tell me in the comments, but is, there's a connection that happens that I think,
Well, there's the antibodies. Like the main thing
yeah,
in those
right, which
first
was
6 months, the antibodies that the baby gets from her
mom.
mother
Yeah,
are really important. And yeah, what they found is that it's like those antibodies. It's the it,
it's a whole immune system.
well, yeah, and it's very difficult to make up for that with like formula and
And
artificial
you
synthetic
can't.
stuff. You can't really. It's the best thing for a baby's health is to be nursed by a woman for at least 6 months.
Right, so here's the thing that I find interesting and why I bring that up as the launch point. Not that I wanted to get into a trans debate, because I certainly don't. I don't want to validate those people on my platform, because a bunch of men predominantly pretending to be something they're not and requiring the rest of the world to subscribe to their fantasy is the issue I've got. And I don't want to get into that part of the topic. But what I'm bringing it into the topic for of today, of what's sacred, is, my God, things that were sacred when I was a teenager, okay, to what's not sacred anymore is staggering. And that to me poses a question that I'm going to put to you men today. How did we lose what is sacred, and whose obligation is it to protect it?
Mm.
Because I think there's like, okay, religion. Who goes to church anymore? Who do you know goes to church? Not many, right? We have a lack of religion and belief in our society. So the sacred church, it's gone. I mean, you've got the rainbow flag at the cathedrals and the Roman Catholic Church. It's like, wait, what? So, like, nothing is sacred anymore. None of our institutions are sacred. None of our social practices. A woman's bathroom, when I was a young guy, like, I had to go in and I worked at a restaurant, so I had to go clean the girl's bathroom. That was so weird to go into the girl's bathroom. I'm like, that's a sacred place. Like, ooh. It's like purses. Same thing, guy don't touch a girl's purse. I don't know what the hell's in there. But, like, again, like, there's a lot of things in our society that used to be held with, and I'm going to use the term, reverence, right? But now the only thing sacred is a half of a percent of our population that has a mental issue. Everything that has to do with anyone with a rainbow flag on them is now sacred, but anything that used to be sacred isn't. So my question to the group is, how did what used to be sacred for 2,000 years suddenly get usurped in 5 years?
It wasn't
Go.
5 years. It started way before that.
Well,
It's been since the, I would say, um, like the start of the 20th century, something around there is when it started. The demystifying of, like, we've been moving toward the West has become more and more secular um, over time, and the success of secular Western science has uh, that plus the lost generation and the disenchantment of World War I really led the West away from religion, tradition, uh, the sacred, you could say. The very idea of sacredness itself has become is seen as archaic in a lot of contexts, in most contexts, really. And yet, I think that what's interesting is that the left still is, like you say, they're still using this mechanism of sacredness because they've simply they've simply moved, like, the category of sacred still exists, but they've just changed what's in the category, and they threw out all the religious stuff and they just replaced it
but
with a bunch
sacred
of
by definition is,
trans ideology.
but sacred, the very first description, connected with
Dude, you
gods.
you used sacred to describe the contents of a woman's purse. So
But
please don't
no, no, no,
sit
hold
here
on,
and
hold on.
now pretend
No,
that it's only religiously
no, no, no,
linked.
no.
No, it isn't.
No, I was using just all the different examples where people have articulated things and called them sacred, right? I'm more talking
Well,
about.
yeah, that's what I'm talking about. The word is bigger than religion. It
Okay.
contains
I,
more than just religion.
oh
Yeah, it's
yeah,
referring to what I just posted in chat, which is I think there's the word sacred. It implies a notion that there's a separation between one thing and another, whereas we don't have that
Well, it's
anymore.
definitely a different category. Like,
Well, like
yeah,
even if you go back to I guess Roman times where it was slowly being eroded away during their era as well, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. And does it benefit society? Debatable.
fly.
Yes.
I want your thoughts, and I want legit. You just came in a minute late, legit. But we're just
Well,
go
Yeah,
ahead,
go,
fly.
man.
It's okay.
I mean, the very root of the word I mean, they always, sacred always goes back to something that's holy or divine. Um, but you must understand or understand that, hey, we are in a new age. And yes, what you just said, yes, it blows my mind the things that we see now. People are they'll really drink the banana in the tailpipe. What it is sacred that a woman should breastfeed a real woman. It's just like DeSantis. He said, he has a war against so-called woke. But here's the deal: I do believe if you're born a male, you're a male. You're born female, you're a female. But and when you ask who's to blame, society is to blame.
Well, okay, again, it's not a blame thing, but the question I asked, and this is the one that we truly, as a society, need to figure this shit out real quick and in a hurry, is the things that we hold sacred. And it was interesting. I was looking at on the Google dictionary, and it put up some interesting, like, similar words, right? So it says holy, hallowed, blessed, consecrated. That was an interesting one. Consecrated, dedicated, religious, spiritual, devotional, church. So Phil's running the Chat
Protected,
GPT.
untouchable, privileged,
Oh yeah,
unaccessible. That's the
inimpeachable,
synonym for sacred. Yes. Yes.
inimpeachable, or unimpeachable. So like, but I don't necessarily agree. I kind of agree with somewhat with what Chris is saying in the context of sacred doesn't necessarily mean religious, but I think over
Well, like
time,
religion is an answer, I think, to the same need, like that deep need or yearning or questioning or whatever that exists within people. Like I think we have some sort of we like sacred things. We have a desire to
hold
dub
things in reverence.
well certain thing yeah things that we consider to be worthy of that reverence we do like to revere. I mean we must because it happens everywhere across culturally across time. So
So it
Well,
seems that they're like you're hitting the nail straight on the head there, ML, which is that there seems to be like a disconnect between we think sacred is just something that's ceremonial or ritual or religious, whereas there's a personal experience and revelation, there's a collective experience or like a collective agreement and belief on what could be sacred, and then there's a divine and spiritual connection. I mean, there is that, but there also is the personal experience and revelation that is what I think what you're touching on there.
yeah, because I think the religion arises in reaction to the 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 perception of the spiritual, I guess is what I would say. Like it's not a case of people created religions and then started having spiritual experiences. I think people started having spiritual experiences and then created religions to explain them.
Mm-hmm.
well, so I have an interesting question. I want legit. I want you to throw in at some point, but when I was thinking about what you guys are talking about, it occurred to me that the Indians, the Hindu, right? They hold the
Mm,
cow to be sacred.
true.
Okay, which I find interesting, right? Because they are picking, and their reasoning behind it is because that's what they believe is, and people are reincarnated as, right? They become cows. I mean, I'm not real sure. I don't know shit about the Hindu religion.
It's something. I think it also has some relation
They
to
don't want to eat their
one
brother
of their
Mike.
gods.
Yeah.
No, because they're. I mean, well, it might be that, but they're not. They do. Oh no, Hindus are vegetarian, aren't they? So
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
So
I believe they are. So
so
And they do
that's
believe in reincarnation. They do
yeah.
believe in that we're spiritual beings and we have lived before many times.
Right. So that and again within they believe that light you're going to is the next delivery room, whether it's in an animal form, you're coming out of an egg, right? That's the premise behind that whole idea of seeing the light. Is that oh yeah, you're being born again, and that's why you have
yeah, I
deja
think
vu
it's
over time, right? There's a lot of this.
there's a
Yeah.
few religions that have like endless cycles of being,
Right.
as opposed to you could see it as like religions generally have two forms where they're either you know you're here in this mortal coil and then you're working to prove yourself worthy
Of the next
of
place.
the next place, or you're here on this mortal coil and you'll be here again infinitely. They
Well,
seem
you
to
know,
be like one of the two.
we had something that started during World War I, World War II, when they had, we can do it, the women's right. So, we want to be on the same equal level as men, do the things that men can do. So, I said that to say this: that has started a whole trajectory of what we're seeing today. Now it's being flipped. Now men are saying, "Oh, we can do what women can do." A man want to be a woman. Oh, he can change his body and do no, no,
We're in
no.
inverted times. Everything's being inverted, which my dead best friend, who was quite Christian, always pointed out as satanic. He said anything that's inverted is Satan.
So legit,
Would
I want
agree
you to
with that.
chime. What do you think of the term sacred? What is the first thought that comes to your mind?
Sacred to me is special. It's holy. It's divine. That's the obviously the topic we're on, but that's my first. As soon as I think of sacred, Native Americans have sacred things, and that's spiritual. They're connected to nature and things along those lines, and so it's a special. it's special to them on a deeper level than just a physical here right now thing.
Now,
There's another element involved.
yeah, I agree. Well, here's an interesting thought, and I want some consideration on it because I think I was listening to Peterson, and one thing Jordan said not long ago that I thought was really poignant. Whatever's at the top of your pyramid of hierarchy is your God, regardless of what it is, right? So, if you think about what is sacred and what will we do to defend what is sacred. So, I know in some religions, right, they believed there are certain sacred places, right, and they would Jerusalem, right, or what's the city that they've been fighting over forever?
Jerusalem.
Jerusalem, right? Everybody believes it's sacred.
Well, the three
Yeah,
Abrahamic religions all
yeah,
have
yeah.
claims on that piece of real estate. Yeah.
Okay, so that definition of sacred elicits a violence for 2,000 years behind that defense of what was sacred. So,
Because you can't question the sacred, which is a bit
which
of a that makes it dangerous.
which brings me to my initial question is how did all of our traditions that were sacred get usurped with an ideology that no one finds sacred?
Well, the first I want to talk about the first thing that happened because I think it's important to recognize
Sure.
that sacredness wasn't just deposed for no reason from society. Sacredness was abused. World War One is this is my opinion and the opinion of lots of people in academia and history and all that. So whatever, but I mean it just makes sense to me. World War One is where the West became disenchanted with the idea of the sacred, the religious, all that. And the reason for it is very simple and very easy to understand. It's because World War One, it was the worst of all the great wars. It is if there was a war that you would pick to not be a part of, that's the one. It was the worst in terms of the suffering of all the men involved, and it was the worst in terms of having no good reason for happening. It was just a giant conflict between warring empires who wanted to try out some of their new war toys. And religious leaders, spiritual leaders on both sides were were not just encouraging, telling all those men, you have to go. It is and God is with you.
Oh, yeah.
God is on our side.
That's
And
the biggest.
they
Yeah.
say there's no atheists in foxholes. Well, that's ironic because God was lost in the foxholes of World War One. There was nothing there except death and misery, and people came out of World War One. The survivors who saw it were just they listened to their to the religious leaders thundering from the pulpits, and they were just like, there were guys saying that on the other side too to their men with equal fervor, and all it led to,
There's
like,
no
God
death.
wasn't involved in any of it. All
No.
it was a giant meat grinder that chewed up and spat out 50 million young men. It was probably the greatest stupidity that humankind has ever engaged in.
Oh, hold on.
And
We're working on debating that.
after that,
Every
well,
war is like that.
no. Okay, so Jocko Willink, because I haven't served. Jocko Willink does a great talk about World War One as being different. World War One was different. Jocko himself has said if there is one war he could pick to never serve in, that's the one, because there were no
The
good guys.
brutality. No, the brutality.
It was the brutality. We had no rules. No rules. World War II had rules. World War II and all other wars after have had rules.
Okay, I agree with that. That's true.
World War One, no rules. Exploding bullets, gas, germ warfare, everything.
Oh, nothing was off the table.
Nothing was off limits. It was, and after that came the what's called the lost generation. So you had Dorothy Parker in The Vicious Circle. You had all
Yep.
of the American expats. It spawned an entire generation of disenchanted, pessimistic, depressed, basically atheistic, anti-religious people, because they had trusted and believed in their spiritual leaders, and then in their perception they had been absolutely just thrown into a meat grinder where there was no God, and their religious leaders all should have been telling them, don't go fight this war. But they were all lockstep with society. It was all part of, you could call it like the World War I version of the military industrial complex had the church
Yeah.
sitting in there too.
Well,
And so after that, you had this massive disenchantment. So I think like that's all in the past. That's kind of natural. I think that what was to not question things can be taken too far and can lead to atrocities like World War I. And I think that was the lesson. But now, so
But we still like that as a people. We're still
well, and
like,
to bring it
we
it
still
forward.
have
So
blinders on as people.
well, okay, so human beings and humankind in general and human society tends to pendulum swing. We we're not very good at making carefully calculated adjustments for social and economic change in reaction to problems. We tend to overreact and do these big swings. And so, I mean, you can see it right now in the culture wars in the West, but I mean, you could see it going back decades. So what happened anyways was you had this mass disenchantment with religious leaders, and you had, in response, the rise of atheism, secularism, and most problematically, postmodernism. Postmodernism is the one that came up in the 60s out of all this,
Yeah.
which is like Jordan Peterson keeps talking about it for a reason. He keeps saying it's at the heart of this. If you want to understand where this crazy gender stuff came from, you have to understand the history of postmodernism, which I do because I studied it. And yeah, it's that. So basically, so let's simplify it. We're a pious society. The West is pious and religious and believes in the sacred overwhelmingly. World War I happens, massive disenchantment, big pendulum swing. Society says, whoa, we got to start questioning things a little more than nothing because we don't want that to happen again. So wham, they go from being really pious and really pious and religious too far, become really, really secular and anti-religious, and the sacred falls out of favor. And that then we have World War II, which is another big clusterfuck, where the religious again are saying God is with us. The Nazis had God meet us on their belt buckles, which means God is with us. So it was the same thing again. And then you had Nagasaki and Hiroshima. So you could say there was another disenchantment and further pendulum swing. So now atheism and secularism is like, society's like, we're going with this. Screw. There's this mass rejection of traditionalism and religion, and that has carried forth into today. But now I think what we're seeing with the rise of Jordan Peterson and people like us just having conversations, center-right atheists like me, we're seeing the pendulum start to come back, because we're seeing like, oh
all
wow,
the devastation
now we've
that
gone
comes
so
with it.
far that we've started to make things sacred again. But the things that we're making sacred are the things that should not, like the least sacred things ever conceived of by human beings, chemically castrating children.
Cutting off
We're now
women's breasts, like, yeah.
attempting to make that sacred. So
Giving
yeah,
them a
now
right to
we're
choose
coming
their
back.
Gender? What the focus?
Oh yeah, no, none of it makes sense, and it's the least sacred thing imaginable. So I think that's why we're seeing this rise of right-wing populism across the entire world. I was trying to explain that to my mother yesterday because she's so, like, she calls herself centrist, and I just laugh. I'm like, what right-wing news sources do you even read? Yeah, zero. You're not centrist. And I said, you still don't get it, that the vast, like, if you were to put a percentage on it, I would presume that roughly 95% of the population of the world is still what leftists here would consider traditional, conservative, and just archaic and outdated. So in other words, conservatives. Like,
Well,
the vast majority of the world is still conservative and traditional, and they're all watching the West. They're all watching us do this gender nonsense.
Oh yeah.
And if you listen to their media,
Oh, they're
we're not
hilarious.
convinced. We're not. Oh, they laughing at us. We're not convincing any of them. They're all like Poland is becoming more and more right wing by the minute because of this stuff. Poland is
We're a
gonna be
cautionary
like,
tale.
well, Uganda just passed like
Yeah.
anti-homosexuality stuff where
No,
you're dead
pedophile.
now.
They'll kill you if you fuck a child, you're dead.
Oh yeah, and if you commit enough sinful gay acts, even as an adult, you're dead.
Rightfully so.
So
need
it's
it.
Yeah.
it's just like the like people in the West are horrified that that's happening, but they don't understand
It's a reaction
how
to what we're
they-
doing.
how they have helped set the table for
Yep.
that. Yeah, it's not coming out of nowhere.
Let me interrupt you
It's
for a
not
minute.
coming out of nowhere. Yeah, I've done my piece.
You've been on for about 5 minutes now, so I'm going to get you off the box so I can get some other voices, and yours is loud, which I appreciate at times. So, as I was thinking about and I brought up the hierarchy thing, what you have at the top of your hierarchy is your God. And right now, I think what we've done.
Social media then as our god.
I was literally going to say exactly that. Is that ourselves have become the thing. We have put individuality as sacred, saying that, like, okay, the whole here, I'm an influencer. Look at my life and give me money. See all the awesome things that I have. You want them. And here, give me money. And if you don't like this, I'm going to die. So, what has become sacred is the love of oneself at the expense of everyone around you. And Phil just put, what is sacred to chat GTP? And I'm going to read it real quick. Wow, that's really, really long.
There are two. I asked it, what is the least sacred thing?
Okay.
And it's referring to like paper clips. Daily, like walking is the least sacred thing. Everybody can do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I asked it, what is the most sacred thing? And it goes into dividing it down into deity and the divine, sacred texts, sacred places, rituals and sacraments, life and creation. I think we can all agree on that one, considering our conversation on World War One. So it's just putting things in, trying to ask it different prompts to see what we can get.
Well,
I'd like to also point out that just to add to what you were saying about the individual, the primacy of the individual, that's postmodernism. So postmodernism, so I took a year of cultural studies, which is all cultural studies is like so you did it's an intro course to cultural studies. So all you're doing is reading their foundational texts, and all of their foundational texts are postmodernists. They're all French. They're all de Saussure, Foucault, Derrida, those guys, and the postmodernism in general primacies the experience of the individual, and this is why. Like, so I know you watch like the Add Everything podcast and Fresh and Fit and stuff like that. It's so common to see the conservative people reference statistics, and then in response to some government statistic about the population at large, a person will respond by saying, well, in my lived experience, this is what I've had, this is what I've seen, and this is my perspective. And they offer that as a fully, like, they expect that
same credence.
To be weighted the same as the government statistics.
Oh yeah, because what they see in their 100-person, yeah, of course.
Well, okay, and so it's worth noting that for the rest of critical thinking, philosophy, and I would say all of the physical sciences, that's called, like, your lived personal experience is called anecdote. And anecdote doesn't have a lot of respect or value. It has about the respect and value 1/1000th of a minimal poll data set, which is 1,000. Like, it really doesn't have much value at all. And indeed, valuing it is a logical fallacy. But in postmodernism and all of the disciplines that draw off of it, it is not a fallacy, it is sacred.
Yeah.
In that it cannot be questioned, it must simply be accepted and then worked around. So
Right.
if someone says to you
I'm a
something
woman.
that's the opposite, yeah, exactly. I'm a woman, even though
Can't
the
you-
person standing in front of you is clearly a man,
Yep. You have to accept it, and it's true.
you have to accept it, and it's true because they have lived it and experienced it and told you. See, again, this is one of the like right away, any not idiot would see a big problem there, which is like, well, they told you. How do you know they're not lying? And the left seems to be pathologically incapable of understanding that evil exists and that people lie. Probably why they keep trying communism. Like it just.
Well,
It is an incredible thing to hear from an atheist. I love that.
I know. I'm the center right atheist. That's my niche. I found my niche.
What do you think, Fly?
I mean, one's truth can be your. I mean, people have their own ideals of what they think.
They think it
Your
could be
truth is.
democratized.
A
They
man
think that
can't-
truth
a
can
man
be
can't
democratized.
In his own mind, he's saying that he's a woman. In his mind, when he's clearly physically a man.
That's called a mental disorder.
But it's
Well,
not
and you know,
okay.
Sam
Well,
Harris,
you
For
said before I
150 years.
and whether or not it does him any good is irrelevant. Sam Harris did a bit about this, and ironically, this is debunking a creationist point, but it works equally well on this gender nonsense, which is that, like, to say that we should allow people to believe clearly delusional, incorrect things just because it might do them some kind of benefit. Okay, so say you have a friend who comes to you one day and he's completely genuine, he's not kidding, you can tell, and he's had this really profound experience, and he tells you that he has become utterly convinced through whatever internal process that he is going to marry Angelina Jolie. That Angelina Jolie is going to be his future wife, that he is going to, take care of all of her kids, and blah, blah, blah. And that is how it is, and he won't accept anyone telling him otherwise. And he tells you that this belief has completely changed his life. Say he was a bit depressed before, a bit shiftless, didn't really have any purpose. Now his life has been energized and reinvigorated. He is getting himself physically in shape, because he doesn't want to be a disappointment to her in bed. He is becoming a better father and a husband in anticipation of having to take care of her boatload of adopted kids. He's doing all these things. He is objectively making his life better and improving himself.
In every measurable standard.
In however you care to measure it, he's doing it. But we still have to acknowledge that your friend has lost his mind. Like however motivating that thought might be for him, it's not true. Now, then you can get into like utilitarian ethical arguments of should you try and dispel it or not when it's doing him so good. But I would simply point to a better third option, which is, well, why don't we believe true things and be motivated by them and improve our lives rather than believing falsehoods? And like, so to the person who thinks that he is a woman, it's like, okay, so you have gender dysphoria. That's
But
what
they don't.
that.
Hold on.
Okay, well,
hold on.
so
I'm going to
we're
put a
gonna
pause
take
for a
them.
minute.
Hold on, because we're not mind readers, so we're going to take them at their word that they are, because it works even better, because then it steelmans it. We're taking them at their word that they are, even though I agree with you. I think half of them are fooling themselves, especially the ones that don't transition. It's like, well, then how are you even?
And they're all lesbians.
Well, you saw Dylan Mulvaney now. So Dylan Mulvaney
I
has
like
come all
women
the way
now.
back around to being a straight dude, except that when he talked to his dad, and his dad said, "Oh, one day I'd like to see. Oh, yeah, I'd like to see you get a woman pregnant one day." And Dylan said, "Oh, no, 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 she would be getting me pregnant." You could just see the father, the father face palming it. I mean, it's just
It used to be amongst men that you were a failure if your daughter got pregnant, wore clear heels, and became a stripper. I think that standard,
or if your son ended up in jail or in a gang.
right? So now the standard is my son has to remain male for all of his adult life to be a good father.
It used to be your father.
My
If you were a
daughter,
father, you were like, "I
hold
hope my
on,
son isn't gay." Now you're like, "I hope my son's just still a dude."
okay, your daughter, hopefully she doesn't have an OnlyFans. Person who lives with his man who has no children and probably never. So there's like absurdity with the idea that instead of wanting our children to be the best version of them that they could be, we have to consider what assault is going. I was talking to a young
Well, and
guy.
we're telling our kids that to bring it back to postmodernism, that their lived experience is absolutely true and real, and that
No
they
matter.
shouldn't let, no matter what, and they shouldn't let anyone else dispute it. And I'm just like that. Like you are you're setting them up to be the world's biggest narcissists. Like you're
Oh,
telling them to never question their own assumptions or opinions. That's basically what you're telling them. You're telling them that they're God. And oh, no wonder they're so insufferable. No wonder they can't learn.
so this goes back to our initial topic, which what is sacred? Kids used to be sacred. Now, I think the left is very much understanding that children actually are sacred, because right now I keep seeing these videos. Like I saw a trans person go, "Why does it even matter to you?" And the guy's response was great. He's like, "Cause you're fucking trying to push it on my goddamn throat, and you're going after my fucking kids." And the guy was
Well, and
bent. And I'm like,
because we're allowed to care. Because we're allowed to care about what's true and what's false. We don't have this idea that you have to have a personal stake in the conversation in order to have an opinion about it is pants on head retarded. And I hear it all the time from people as though it's true.
"Oh yeah,
Like
you can't
someone
talk
said,
about abortion."
yeah, that was literally what I was about to say. People say to me all the time, "Oh, you can't talk about abortion. You're a man." And I'm like,
Am I?
abortion is about murder. I'm
It
allowed
is
to talk about
100% murder.
murder. Like that's the subject is whether or not a human life is being terminated. I know for you leftists, you like to think that the subject is about female body autonomy. No, female body autonomy is a very important issue. One of the few issues that trumps it, human life. Human life is kind of at the top. There isn't really a lot that gets above that.
So hold on. Sacred, would you say? Human
Well,
life
I mean,
used to be
so
sacred. Hold on. I have a point. Stop
it
interrupting me for a
used to
minute.
be
Hold on.
sacred,
I want to
sure.
say
Yeah.
something. Please let me get this out. And then I want Phil to respond. And you're last on this one, ML. I have a theory, and it comes to the generational changes in society about what's wrong with the Gen Z or Zillennials or what the fuck they're called. So, I grew up with a mom and dad in my house. I was a latchkey kid, so I didn't have mom home or anything. But I was brought up with as dysfunctional as they were, a loving set of parents, and I love them immensely to this day. They did the best that they could with what they thought they had. But my mom taught me how to love without condition. My mom taught me to respect human life, to respect all life. And then as I aged, my dad taught me what it meant to be a man, how to behave like a man, and what that entailed. And as we've, in society, removed men from the home, and especially in the black community, you have a 70% single mother rate, which is unheard of in
Yeah, it
history.
started in the 70s.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So men were taken out of the home. First failure. Second failure is that the state and the school system decided that it was their obligation to raise your children, and they know what's best, and they still say it to this day. Okay? And what has happened is we have a society of children through a multitude of small, stupid decisions by people without thinking them through. Because I think the 21st century's motto is going to be unintended consequences. Because that's like
That could be the
literally.
motto of humanity.
Right, unintended consequences. So
That's history.
we have video games that glorify killing people, robbing, stealing, murdering. Grand Theft Auto is the most popular freaking game in history of the world. Okay, we have fatherless homes that teach respect, self-control, and discipline. We have women who have no ability to teach actual emotions to children because they have no interest in controlling their own other than to seek out whatever makes them happy at the time. And I liken it to raising a plant, right? So a farmer raises a crop with effort, with concise, specific watering, specific pruning, specific ground, specific times that the crops are planted and harvested. A weed just fucking grows. And nothing stops it from being a weed. It just keeps growing and becoming worse. And that's what has happened to our children today. They've lost the value of life because their mother stopped teaching it. They don't have discipline from a father figure that doesn't exist. They're being told that their lived experience trumps reality and that life has very little value other than points. And the more you kill and the more you take and destroy, the more points you get. And we're shocked to find that we have kids going in and shooting each other up every weekend. I don't find that shocking at all. I find it more shocking that it doesn't happen more. So, Phil, what do you think?
Well, I come from a religious background, so I'm just going to point straight to two things. One's morals. If you fix morals, you actually have some morality and culture, you fix a lot of the issues. And that typically stems from the mother, and I think you touched on that already. And then the second is taking responsibility. My dad taught me responsibility.
Your mom teaches
I
you to
don't.
love unconditionally.
Yeah, my dad's like, if you do this, otherwise you're going hungry or you don't have a roof over your head, you know? You want to buy something, you pay for it. There's a level of responsibility there, and that stems over into having respect for other people who can do the same job you can do. And so there's the value of life, and then you learn the respect of life. And that can, I think that's lost. And then the same thing can be said about how you carry yourself, what you do. And you talk about abortion. I think if you even go back to the root of that, which is while you're in a copious position, you're doing something that then in turn creates a child, you should probably take responsibility for it. You don't even have to go to the extent
Murder
of
and
what do we do to not take the responsibility of this. It is, we did this, us, we should take responsibility for it. And then that even stems further back to, I don't know, you have a kid with somebody, you should probably marry them.
Legit?
So that the child that you have can actually grow up with a father and a mother. You've done that. It's your responsibility now. And that might be something where it's arguable and it's dependent upon situations. I know there's some real out there situations, but I think it all stems down to responsibility and morals.
Fly?
I think that's 100%.
Oh, I'm sorry, Legit. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying that. I think that's 100% correct. I didn't have my first kid until 2 years after I was married, and it was a decision that we made that okay, well now is the time. There's a lot of weird stuff that you also mentioned, or Brian or whatever you want me to call you.
Whatever.
Uh, th- that Jesse Lee Peterson actually touched a point on with forgiving your mom for not being, I think he mainly likes to talk to the black community, but I still enjoy listening to a wide range of podcasters that have information on interesting aspects of life, or I guess interesting information on aspects of life. And yeah, it comes down to that we're not taught on how to be responsible anymore. and how we need to get back into that. Like the pendulum swing that ML was talking about earlier, I think it's actually a rotating pendulum swing where it comes around, like he was saying, but then once it gets reversed, it comes back around the other way, and we're going to have to stop it before it reaches that other extreme swing and try to get it to slow down a little bit. And I don't know how we're going to get it to slow down because with all the stuff that's going on in the world these days, it's like people are just all the cherry picked inverted satanic stuff is what you see
Oh,
on the news. That's it, the mainstream media. That is the most extreme inverted stuff that you can get your information from.
oh, even further, I saw on TikTok a satanic ritual being performed in LA. Literally out, like, recorded
Yeah,
and
just
put
out in
out.
the open,
Yeah.
and they
Like
it's
it
oh
was,
that's
let's
okay,
pray to
you know,
Satan. It's
because
like, wait, what?
well because that's their religion, that's their satanic religion. What they're doing, they think is sacred, and I don't know how we get rid of the idea that it's cool or whatever to be satanic. It
It's,
doesn't.
You're not. You're not. You're never going to get rid of that.
no. And
yeah, how
what
do
do
you
you think?
sway that though?
Milton already kind of like Satan is innately a cool character, but Satan is kind of to me. Satan is like the ultimate. He's the ultimate embodiment of, which is why in our literature, I think most of our great villains have kind of patterned after Satan. You know, he's
The great
supposed to be.
deceiver.
Well, yeah, he's supposed to be compelling. He's
Yeah.
supposed to be, yeah,
He was
yeah. He's
beautiful.
supposed to be. He's like Al Pacino doing that speech in The Devil's
That
Advocate,
was such a
where,
good movie.
and that speech was really good
Yeah.
because that's how Satan would talk.
Yeah.
Satan wouldn't appear
I'm a
with red
fan of
horns.
man.
Ooga booga booga! I'm scary. We're going to hell with a
Nope.
pitchfork. Like no, no, no.
I'm a fan of man.
Way more sophisticated. The most
But
sophisticated
Satan
entity
has
you can
personality.
imagine.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
To me,
Satan
has
has
personality of
all.
a critical thinker, man.
Well, you know, it's part of it is just kind
Hey,
of
let Fly talk.
in. It's like storytelling. The bad guy gets to say the cool stuff, you know.
Go ahead, Fly.
Well, I would go back on abortion, and you was talking about that.
Go ahead.
I really don't believe in abortion, but that's a misnomer. I mean, when I think about it, yes, I do, and I don't. If there was a rape occurred, I do believe a woman should. That's just me. But if you have a consensual sex, I don't believe in abortions.
Well, so
Where it
that
gets
she
wrapped
If
up.
a
so
woman was raped, if she was raped,
okay. So
anything unconsensual,
so
and
here's
a
the
child, I
he-
believe in abortion.
Well, now,
here's
so here's a question: would you consider that statement that you just made? Is that a sacred statement, and that you wouldn't put that belief up for like examination or questioning, or is that
I mean, to me, it's sacred. To me,
fair enough? Yeah, no, it wasn't a leading question. I just
I could throw something out there that might be a little controversial and maybe
Go.
prod a little bit. I agree that's a very delicate situation, and I think morally, from my position, I'm juxtaposed to both, right? Keeping, I understand the strain, and aborting the child, I can also see that there's a strain there too, morally, and so it's like crossing the line of both sides, and I don't like it. But then there's another part of it where I think it's a matter of being loving to a degree, and then the other side of it is to how do we give people common sense and morality to a degree where they don't go out and put themselves in precarious situations. And I'm saying this very generally because I understand how this goes, but there's a part of precarious situation, there's a part of promiscuity, and there's a part of I didn't truly think this through.
so
That got them to that situation.
all right. So I'm going to answer that with an interesting conversation I observed on whatever podcast, and this is a really common topic on every of these younger podcasts. Your body count, right? What's your body count? And these women aren't talking about numbers like 5 or 6. One go like 200, 300, and I'm like,
What?
oh yeah, Absolutely. And they don't even scoff
Sorry,
at the number.
what was
You
the
said
number?
300?
300.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, what? Sorry, I missed that. What was the stat?
So body count. It was
Yeah, yeah.
on. They were talking.
Oh
These
yeah, yeah, I saw
girls,
that. Yeah,
and
yeah,
they
yeah.
were like, "Oh yeah, the most I heard was like 300," but that means there's a majority of women that are over 100, like 100
Sure.
different mates, and like these guys are talking like if a girl's got more than like four, they're like not interested. And I know there's
Now
a.
remember, everything podcast
Oh yeah,
and
yeah, yeah, I
Fresh
know,
and Fit, they're in Miami. Miami girls,
I know.
people like girls. A certain kind of girl comes to Miami. I mean,
But okay, I bring that point up not as to alienate those specific humans, right? But it's more of a highlight that, you know, this whole argument about abortion that we're discussing has to do with a morality and accountability. And the interesting thing is, okay, so if women control who gets to sleep with them 99% of the time,
True.
okay, the
well, they
accountability,
get to choose in all legit cases. You
correct,
just get rid of the grape thing
But-
altogether.
correct, right? So
Yeah.
that being the case, they're 100% responsible for the outcome of the decision. Because if you look at a marriage, like when I got married to my wife, we were talking. I was like, okay, look, you're 40 years old. I'm not going to tell you how to live. That's an absurd idea. You've lived for a long time, raised 3 kids, and didn't need my help at all in telling you what to do. But you can't say to me, well, why'd you let me do it? Because I'm going to say you're a fucking adult and made a stupid decision. But if you want to say, well, why'd you let me do that? I get to make the decision. And I hold all the responsibility for the decision. So if it's stupid, I'm going to say, yeah, I was dumb, baby. I fucked that up. Right? But that's not how women behave, and all of society don't hold any woman accountable for how they behave. If a woman gets pregnant, she gets an abortion. If she makes a mistake, oh, it's okay, she's a girl. They get forgiven for absolutely every stupid thing that they do as a society. They're not held accountable for any of their behaviors. And then when men say, "Oh yeah, you know that it's morally wrong to kill a child," they're like, "Oh, you can't tell me what to do with my body." And it's like, hold on a minute. You can financially
They're just
obligate me
thinking
for.
emotionally.
Oh, right. You can financially obligate me for 18 years and take 65% of my net pay for my one decision that you got to decide and you got to control and you got to get the financial outcome from. No.
The problem is that they came at you with an emotional argument, which is kind of like a contradiction in terms. They just basically came to you with an emotionalism, and you
So
responded with facts and logic, which
I-
is
hold on. I'm getting ready to come back.
it's like responding to a Portuguese guy in Russian. It's
I
just
know.
the-
Hold on. But I said all of that because I want to respond to something that Fly said, which was he said in rape, I don't think it's true or I think it's okay. And my plight with that is that's hypocrisy because the real conversation is ML stated, and I actually concur with, is are you okay with murder? Because if you're okay with murder, then it's okay to have an abortion on just cause, right? It's like, okay, then I can murder people because they say something I don't like. Because it didn't fit.
Well, yeah, if you're okay with murder, a lot of things become possible. I mean,
Correct.
yeah.
So you
Right.
can't have a position where one human acts another human and causes like so. Let's say for some reason I turn into a bad guy, an evil villain, and I rape a 20-year-old girl and she gets pregnant. Okay, that child, no matter how ill conceived, is all potential. There is nothing about that child that will be inherently evil just because I was a bad human.
Well, yeah,
There's
that's
no
one of the
evidence that
the
I
sins of
can
the father do
genealogically
not pass on to the son. Just because you
fucking-
were a rapist
Yeah,
doesn't mean
okay.
that the
So-
child deserves to get punished by being aborted.
hold on.
Yeah, you can't. I used to use that argument all the time when I was arguing against abortion for the Christian position. I would say, so you're saying that it's okay to do it if the father is an asshole rapist, but it's not okay to do it if he's
Let's say
a
he's a
good
scientist.
guy. I mean, there's something confused there.
Right.
I
So
mean, if you rape, rape. Come on now, rape.
Well, because either way,
So,
like the child is
unconsensual.
innocent.
the child
Yeah,
is
the child.
innocent.
Because the
That's true.
child's
I
innocent. The
agree.
child has no
She
ability to
shouldn't have to.
control the its conception or genesis or the
Okay,
context of it.
what if she get raped by her father?
Okay. Incest.
Come on, that's
So incest introduces an actual medical challenge. So that's a whole different conversation. when
Child,
it
but
comes- but
that child is still
gonna be
what,
fucked up.
regardless of the medical complication, the child
Mhm.
that is the product of the incest is still innocent.
Right, but here's
Even
the
if
thing,
it's
right?
malformed, that's not the kid's fault.
No.
So it's very complicated.
Oh yeah, but
There are three things that come to mind from this conversation, and one of them is about kind of referring back to my previous point, which was just looking at women and saying it's all their fault for going out and being promiscuous and putting themselves in bad positions. The same can be said about men
Oh,
who
yeah.
are predators, right? And so I want to make that very clear. The second thing is I think there's a and I think this is where you stand, and I think this is where it's very important, where we do not have true punishment at all for this crime. None. You go what? You go to jail? Bro. Seriously? That's the level? Oh, you steal something, you go to jail for X, right? The crime versus or the
there is
the
no
damage
punishment for
versus
abortion.
there's the punishment isn't equation to the actual crime itself. It doesn't equate. And so that needs to be reconciled. The second is that kind of referring back to the initial conversation about things being sacred.
Life is sacred.
Well, copulation used to be sacred,
Yeah.
and now it's not. It's a commodity.
Yeah. Interesting life.
It's not even a commodity.
No, it's
because
nothing.
They give it away
when you
for
can have
free.
that many body counts, it's a commodity.
I know.
They
It's
give
not
it
a
away for
commodity
free
anymore.
now.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's freer than water.
Well, hold on a minute. So you said
Yeah,
something
because water
interesting.
you gotta pay for sometimes if it comes
Unless
in
you go to
a
the
bottle.
park.
So
Unless
I'm
you go to
gonna.
the park.
So
with
there
the
was.
meth heads.
Hold on.
Sex it is sacred.
Hold on.
It's a spiritual-
Yes.
it's a
I
spiritual
know.
act.
Call on me. I got something to say. Fuck.
Hey,
So-
you're the host.
I know. But I can't get a
Well, so
word
that
in
means you're
edgewise.
supposed to be facilitating the conversation.
I
not
know.
dominating.
But I have something that I want to bring up that's very interesting based on what people were saying.
Well, just
So-
wait. Let it flow. You'll get your turn.
Yeah, I know. Patience is not. I don't wait in lines either.
That's why I'm typing.
I know. So I was watching a reel today that was from Andrew Clavin. And then I started going down a rabbit hole, and I just came across this quote that somebody posted. It was from the Bible. And it was talking about sex in the Bible. And it said that a husband and wife should never abstain from sex unless it's in prayer to get closer to God. But afterward, they should recouple as to keep Satan out of their marriage. And it literally says it like that. Now, I'm paraphrasing. I'm not reading. I think it was in Corinthians. But it has to do with the sacredness of intimacy between a husband and a wife. And not only was that the way procreation was done, but it's also how the relationship and marriage stays strong, not only in physical relationship, but in their religious belief with their deity. Because God knows that sex is super powerful in the context of how it influences how we behave, and that it needs to maintain its sacredness between a husband and a wife. Whereas it's become just like a bag of popcorn that you reach in, get whatever flavor you want, and it has no. And if there's a consequence of more popcorn, yeah, we can throw that shit away. So there's interesting truth in that, but I don't know that there's a metaphysical proof.
Well, I think that's a reference to parabonding. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but there is a physical connection. I think you can refer it to women get more emotionally attached before men do. It takes them about 3 sessions where they're at their max, and it kind of stays about the same. Whereas men, it's a slow hill. And you can dive into pair bonding. It's an interesting topic, but you know, it's a read.
You know what I mean? I just
Oh
think
God, yeah. Well, it's probably yeah, and it's totally understandable why women would pair bond quickly and men would pair
Yes.
bond slowly. It's
Yeah.
you can figure it out in your own head.
It has something to do with DNA and spine.
Has something to
in
do
reference.
with reproductive strategies.
Yeah.
Different reproductive strategies for the sexes.
Right.
In reference to what you're saying there, Brian, it's Corinthians 7, 5 through I think 12.
Yeah. But again, it's very much, you know, I
Well, I'd like to point out, just because of what I'm typing here, and Legit's talking as well there, like, I think that as an example of it, I think the left has become quite afraid of the idea of sacredness. They real like, and abortion's a great one for that, because I'm still not clear, and I'm pro-choice, but via a long and complicated process, and via an argument that nobody who's pro-choice I've ever talked to accepts or likes. So you could consider me pro-choice with a huge asterisk, but I still don't understand how in the leftist pro-choice, like the standard pro-choice position, a fetus is not a human person or a baby with any rights or anything at all. It's just a clump of cells or a bunch of goo, right up to and including the point where the baby is passing through the birth canal in the process of being born, because most of these nut cases support partial birth abortions. And it's only at the final, like, I'd like them to pinpoint the very second.
They become
Like,
human.
is it when the baby crowns? What if the baby's coming feet first? Is it not a human person until its brain is out of the vagina? And like, what is the, like, at the end of it, please explain your reasoning for all of it, because I know that there's not going to be any science behind it. It's just going to be because you need it to be this way so that you can keep abortion legal. And that's not an argument.
Continue the narrative.
it's
Well, it's just so you can continue the practice. Yeah, I mean,
Well-
and that's not an argument.
well, it has to do with that, what we hold sacred. We used to hold
Well, it
human
just makes a
life
lot more
sacred.
sense. It makes a lot more sense to hold that the fetus, like, certainly, like, for me, once it's got fingers and toes and it's got some kind of a heartbeat, once it's starting to look pretty human, at that point it's kind of like, why would we not start to ease that into the sacred category, into the protected status category of a human person? We do it in terms of, we think very harsh things. Like, secular atheist leftists think very harsh things about pregnant mothers that drink or consume harsh drugs or chemicals that harms their baby in the womb. They think very harsh things about, and call those mothers all sorts of terrible names, just like the rest of us. But that's not coherent in their worldview, because that mother isn't doing anything to a human person.
Yeah.
She has no responsibility to a clump of goo. These leftists all call it a tumor. Well, she has no responsibility to be nice to a tumor living within her. So how are you even consistent with, like, how can you hate mothers that drink and have fetal alcohol kids? How can you hate that? Like, it just, you have to give the fetus
It's called
itself
hypocrisy.
some kind of sacredness, some kind of value. You have to start treating it as some kind of human. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. You're not harming a human, so why do we care? We excise tumors and destroy them, so why do we have a problem?
So, I'm going to bring us back a minute, and
I agree that sex is sacred, by the way.
and
Atheist is saying this. I have always thought sex is sacred. I have never had a one-night stand. I only have sex. I've had sex with a half dozen women that I've loved and had long-term relationships, and that is it. I've turned down numerous one-night stands, threesomes, etc. Never regretted any of it. And it's funny, I never had to be told. I never had to be convinced. None of my atheistic journeys ever touched upon the subject, nor have I ever cared to even look at whether or not my view of sex being sacred is rational or logical. That's just the way it is for me. And I've like people who think differently. I'm like, hey, good for you. Go away. Don't be near me. I don't like that.
So there's a thing I'm gonna kind of wrap this up with today. Is I think we've gone on a lot of different topics, and yeah,
We
it's
always do. We should just call this the Tangent Podcast.
yeah, no kidding. But
All right.
the reality is, say what is sacred is that which we hold value to as a society, and that which we do not permit others to contaminate, destroy, or to erode.
Hmm.
I think the defense of what is sacred should be the conversation in society right now, because we've allowed things to become considered sacred that aren't even close, that don't even fall in the category. What you think you are is not sacred. If you think you're a girl and you're a guy, that's not sacred. What is sacred is a life. What is sacred is the things that we as a society have chosen collectively to preserve without being disturbed. I think that's a pretty good definition of what sacred is. Anything that should be preserved and not destroyed. Because I think that falls and covers most categories of sacred. What do you think? I'm going to start on the bottom, work my way up. Legit? And this will be our final thoughts.
That's actually a pretty good way of putting it. Um, yeah, if I hadn't just been thrown right into the conversation late today, I might have been able to come up with that too. But I know what today's topic was about. But yeah, something to be preserved without being destroyed. Absolutely. Um, some religions hold rocks sacred. Some places are sacred. There's a lot of things that are sacred. We covered a lot of sacred topics, and it all boils down to just that: preservation and not destroying it. Uh, that's a really good way of putting it. I wish I could have came up with that myself.
What do you think there, Fly?
Hey, I mean, I agree. I mean, you hit it right on the nail. A lot of things that were sacred are not sacred. I mean, even when you talked about the body count, I heard the same thing. I mean, even like 400 or 500. And when you think about enter, enter, we have an outer.
Yeah.
All those different bodies, different spirits are entering her.
Flopping around on top of her sweatily.
Oh man, that is
Oh,
fucking. But hey, guys, I do know that if a male does it, we're called philanderopers, the billionaire playboys, this and that. A woman do it, she's a whore. But
Well,
still, she has an intern.
I
She
know.
there. Oh my god, that blew me away. I heard it a few weeks ago
I
on
know.
a podcast. A woman had like 400. It was bragging about it. Sex is sacred. It's spiritual, man. I
Yeah.
can't even. Oh my god. I, I have daughters. I can't even.
I got four of them,
Oh
man.
my god.
I
I
have
have
none,
daughters.
and I have none,
would
and
be
I feel the
over.
same way.
They would be out the family, man. I can't. No.
All
I
right,
No.
respect that.
Phil,
All right, man. Let me. Yeah. You hit it on the nail, dude.
you
Yeah,
go, Phil.
I really respect that. There's a part of me that I'll kind of share a story. My dad used to work with this gentleman who was a partner in his business, and there was a time where I was like, I don't want to have any kids. I never want to have kids. And his response was, "You want to have kids?" I said, "Why?" It's because it's your responsibility to put something good into the world,
Mm,
some level of morality to share what you
right.
know into the world. Otherwise, the world's getting a worse place. So I'm like, damn. So I
That's
think the
nice.
same can be said, right? So
That's nice.
I think the responsibility for us, for anybody, no matter the level of morality you have, is to speak about it, to share it, to push it forward, and to improve upon it, um, from a societal standpoint. But I mean, Morality's a waning factor in at least the Western culture where we stand. So, but it is important.
All right, ML.
Yeah, my big thoughts and takeaway from this really, as you know, I try and focus more on the. I mean, I don't have a side, but the side that I came from, the left, and my thoughts really are just about like I think the left still. I think the urge to use reverence as a verb, the urge to reverence the sacred. I think it is innate. I think it's biological, and so I think that the left, even though they despise the idea, I think they're still doing it because they have to, because it's a human thing to do, and they can't stop themselves. All they can do is fool themselves, and so they've rejected the traditional religious notion of the sacred, and they have replaced it with this secular. Well, it's not even. Well, it is secular because it has to be, but this ideology of like this gender ideology, which they hold as like, and they handle it pretty much. If you talk to a leftist about this gender ideology stuff, they handle it the same way as if you're talking to like a Jehovah Witness about Bible stuff, where you ask them a few of the core questions about the issue, and they give you their official talking
The
points
tenants.
back. Yeah, exactly. And then if you follow up with any further questions, it's over. What you're supposed to do is just go,
Oh,
oh,
thank you.
oh, okay, thank you. Now I know that. I accept that, and now I'm just like you. It's very Borg behavior, but it's interestingly enough, I think that's the same thing that the left did, that the secularists, the atheists did with communism, in Russia. So they have Russia's an incredibly traditional, pious, religious country. The Bolsheviks come along, the Russian Revolution comes along, Red October, and they now have a secular, atheist, communist state where you can't be religious anymore. Well, where does all that religious energy, where does all that reverential urge go? Oh, well, the communists figured out a place for that to go. It just goes to the leader. So they just transferred. It's like, hey, take down. We're a secular Russia now. So in every room there's a picture of Jesus Christ. Take down those pictures and replace them with a picture of Stalin. It's the same thing, only they're fooling themselves into thinking, oh, we're atheists, we're not acting like religious people anymore, we're not reverencing things without questioning them anymore. Yes, you are. You've just changed the things. And I think that, again, it's like my own journey to becoming like a center-right, but still atheist, but very center-right, traditional, conservative, the whole bit. I'm like, I think there's so many. I honestly think these days the majority of atheist secular people are actually tilted more towards the center right, and they're fooling themselves. They're acting out like they worship, and they worship in a secular way the sacred, but what they're worshiping as sacred is profane, is the least sacred thing possible, is unscientific. Oh, the irony of it, the left that holds themselves as the party of science, the party of reason, the smart people's party. But what happened to that? Men can be women, women can be men. There's no such thing as biological sex. No one told the biologists, because they still like biological sex.
Science is the same thing.
Well, the so-called gender binary, no such thing. It's a biological binary that is for all mammals, not just people. That's what they don't seem to get. It's like you can rewrite this in your own head, in your head canon, and pretend that it is this way. But you haven't even bothered to realize that the rewriting of the rules you just made, you just rewrote the rules for all of the animal kingdom too. Because you think we're divisible from them to that degree? We're not. So I think that to put a point on it, I think that the urge and the need for the sacred is It's as there as much as it's ever been because I don't think it's going anywhere. I think it's a part of us,
I think it's
and I think
innate.
that I think it's innate, and I think that the pendulum, and I think that the need for it is so great that the pendulum is swinging back. It's just
Well,
that, and the fact that what is being
it's like the
like
Jesus
basically,
revolution.
well, you're basically it's like society, Western civilization just took away Jesus and all the comforting religious traditions that had been there for thousands of years and said, don't worship that. Here's Derrida, Foucault, some postmodernists, and men can be women. Worship that instead. Well, that'll be fine. That'll do just as well. And it's like, yeah, no, it's not.
Because
Shocker.
because it's not actually sacred.
Well, and they're I guess the final point being they need to stop fooling themselves. They need to recognize that the pattern of behavior, they being the left and these gender ideologues, the pattern of behavior and thought that they are exhibiting is exactly the same pattern as those religious zealots that you like to think the traditionalists are. You're no different from them. The only difference is that you're lying to yourself and you're on the side that supports child mutilation.
Yeah.
So have fun defending that.
Well, folks, I'm sure that this went a lot of directions you didn't see coming when you started watching. And next week, by the way, our topics usually come from a conversation me and ML have throughout the week about some crazy shit we see. And we're just going, wait,
Just send
what?
the news to each other going, what
Yeah.
the fuck?
Yeah, we send each other the news going, did you see that shit? And
Today in clown world, ugh.
Right, exactly.
Hey, Clown World.
Today in Clown
That's a good
World.
That's
Yeah.
a good one. That's a good one. I like that.
But that is legitimately how this topic came about. Is we were
That's
starting
a
to
good-
talk about it, and I was like, no, stop, because we gotta record it. And
I saw a headline that I thought it was a humor headline. What was it? It was dystopian science fiction authors
yep,
angry at reality for consistently outdoing them. It's like our dystopian fantasy authors cannot keep up with reality.
Hmm.
so with that, guys,
That's a nice one.
as always, I appreciate the fact that you all come and spend your time here and talk about topics that are sensitive without any attack on each other. And if you're watching this, this is what discourse looks like. That's why it's called the Discord discussions, because this is discourse. We are discussing our observable world, and we're
What's a
putting
dialectic? You got
Yeah.
a dialectic and you got a debate. A debate is about scoring points off each other, leading each other down gotcha question paths into big traps, and then spiking the football and saying you're an idiot in increasingly clever and sophisticated ways. A dialectic is about a bunch of people getting together, selecting a topic, and all agreeing mutually that we're not going to do those debate things, that we're going to look for the common ground rather than the disagreement, and we're going to do a deep dive into this subject
Let's
and see
unpack
if
it.
we can all pull something out of it, for it by bouncing off of each other and yeah.
You know, one of the things that ML said to me not too long ago that I take an immense level of pride in, that I thought was probably the biggest compliment I've been paid in years, is ML said at the end of our discussions, he has more to think about than for the rest of the day. Like, he spends his day thinking about all of the topics and all the points that were brought up by these men of varying ages, varying education. And to me, for somebody, ML's extraordinarily well read and a very smart man by a lot of measurable standards. So to have him walk
Except
out,
actual measurable standards, because I haven't done any.
yeah, I mean, you could. I'd really like to see your IQ score, which would be pretty hilarious, I'm sure. But um, that's the whole idea of it, is that when you're done listening to us discuss something, that you go home and you talk to somebody about it, talk to someone at your work about it, and go, I watched these five guys debate uh, what's sacred, and there's no point in that I didn't agree with most of them, but yet here we
Or
are,
even
and
if
none
you
of it's
disagree.
protected. Yeah,
If you disagree, I mean, that's the start to an intellectual journey. Because if you disagree, but you have the courage to then
Discuss.
think about
Yeah, we try to get you
why.
to thinking, plant a seed,
Yeah.
to get you to thinking, to start that thinking process, which people
Yeah.
no longer do anymore. To use common sense, which is not so commonly practiced.
It's exceptional sense.
Common sense
It's not
is
common anymore.
a
That's why it's called exceptional
It's not
sense.
common anymore.
it's a phrase that when you start getting serious
Let's do that
about
next week.
thinking,
Common sense. Let's do common
Well,
sense
Let's
next
do it.
week.
Let's do it.
like
Let's
in
dive
the
into
in
it.
the philosophy world, when you it's not there.
No, don't start.
When you
Don't
get-
stop it. Stop
No,
it.
We got
this
to
will come.
record it all.
This will
We
come
gotta
up.
record it all.
I was just gonna say that common sense isn't something that, like, the more serious you get about thinking, the less you're going to be talking about common sense.
What
It's
we
not-
say, everyone has common sense, but everyone's sense is not common.
I just don't find it a useful term. I'm just like it's.
And
to me,
that'll be
it's
a
kind
part of the
like
topic.
Used to just cover up a bunch
I
of
know,
other things.
and we're gonna go there, gentlemen. Thanks.